This story tells the story of a high school boy named Ryota. Ryota felt heavy-hearted. He remained silent when a naked girl sat beside him and touched his sensitive area. The girl whispered to Ryota, who was still silent, that the boy should not feel heavy-hearted or think too much. It is natural for humans to have relationships just to fulfill their desires and feel good. Ryota understood that even though what had been in his mind was such a thought, he still felt heavy-hearted. Ryota himself, honestly, did not know what made him hold back. The girl was still trying to get Ryota to relax. She knew that whenever Ryota was at his peak, he would simply let it pass and pass as usual. The girl added that it would feel like pouring it on a tissue, only it would be better to pour it on a partner. Ryota began to waver. In this case, the girl's words were valid and nothing else mattered. The beginning of Ryota's life-changing story was when one day he was suddenly dumped by his girlfriend. His girlfriend was a simple, beautiful girl named Miss Hiro. Ryota was quite happy with his romantic relationship with Miss Hiro, but that happiness was suddenly snatched away. Miss Hiro, who invited Ryota to meet on the rooftop, said that she wanted to break up with Ryota. Ryota was confused about why that happened or perhaps what mistake he had made. Ryota didn't know and wanted to find out by asking Miss Hiro directly. Miss Hiro immediately backed away while displaying a defensive gesture. She felt scared. Miss Hiro always felt scared when a man raised his voice. Ryota wanted to know why Miss Hiro wanted to break up with him. Both of them seemed fine, and nothing even bothered their relationship. Miss Hiro also confirmed that she still loves Ryota to this day. Miss Hiro's words made Ryota even more confused about the reason behind Miss Hiro's attitude. Ryota was reluctant to break up with Miss Hiro and promised that he would fix what was broken and even apologize to Miss Hiro if Ryota had unknowingly done something that Miss Hiro didn't like. Miss Hiro panicked, especially when Ryota approached. She shouted for Ryota not to come near her. Miss Hiro still stands by her decision to break up with Ryota. She can't continue her romantic relationship with him. They can't be together, not because of Ryota, but because Miss Hiro can't handle men. Miss Hiro has a fear. She can't stand it when someone else touches her, especially if it's a man. Ryota then asks why Miss Hiro remained his girlfriend. Miss Hiro initially thought that Ryota was different from other men, but when Ryota became Miss Hiro's boyfriend, Ryota became very strong. The final straw was when Ryota pushed me down the Ferris wheel. Ryota does remember that it happened, but it was just an accident. There was no intention whatsoever for Ryota to force himself on Miss Hiro. However, Miss Hiro also knows that eventually, Ryota did have the desire to do so. That was the basis for Miss Hiro's decision to leave Ryota. Ryota returned home frustrated and even depressed. He had thought about dying, but on his way home, Ryota saw a girl surrounded by several men who were trying to do something bad. The girl looked like Miss Hiro. Ryota immediately screamed as if he were calling the police. The scream made the men leave. Ryota managed to save the girl. The girl was very grateful to Ryota. The young man was the only one who dared to save her. She wanted to give something as a token of gratitude, but Ryota suddenly received a call requiring him to go somewhere immediately. Ryota went to a hotel after a call from his father, who had suddenly returned to Japan. Ryota's father happily told Ryota the news that he was getting married again. That night was their first time having dinner together, and because of that, his father wanted Ryota to come along and meet his future stepmother. His father was full of praise for Ryota's future stepmother's beauty. Ryota was also told that his stepmother already had a daughter from a previous marriage. Both mother and daughter were equally beautiful, and the daughter was also in high school and looked to be around Ryota's age. Still, Ryota was surprised by his father's sudden marriage. Ryota's father asked his son because he realized that his son did not seem well. Ryota was surprised how his father knew, but it was no longer surprising because his father worked in wildlife, where he treated animals that couldn't even speak. Ryota then told what happened to him, but more about the incident where he saved a girl. His father praised his son's heroic attitude, but Ryota dismissed it as just a misunderstanding. His father wanted to know what happened afterward, but Ryota answered honestly that he rushed home. It was a little regretful for Ryota's father, because he thought that if Ryota had stayed longer, maybe his son would have received a delicious reward. Ryota would not do that because Ryota was not the type of person who would take advantage of someone's misfortune. Not only that, there was a kind of heavy vibe from the girl he helped. Soon the person they were waiting for arrived. Ryota's future stepmother was named Mariko, while her daughter was Yuzuki. Ryota immediately recognized Yuzuki. She was the girl he had helped earlier. Yuzuki, who saw Ryota, immediately ran towards him, pushing him until he fell and was now on top of Ryota. The girl seemed to be crying and said that she wanted to see Ryota and thank him. Ryota's father wondered how his son knew Yuzuki, and Ryota also immediately replied that he had just met her at that time. Mariko was confused by what happened until Ryota's father explained what happened. Mariko was quite happy to learn that she now had a good son. The couple then expressed their relief that Yuzuki and Ryota would live together once they returned abroad. Yuzuki had even transferred to the same school as Ryota. The preparations were complete even before Ryota knew about the plan. Yuzuki was thrilled to meet Ryota again. Yuzuki hated men. She believed all men would always try to be nice to her, but with lustful gazes that constantly roamed her body. However, Yuzuki felt that Ryota was different. Ryota helped her, a stranger, without asking for anything in return. Her crush on Ryota quickly grew into love, even obsession. She began to desire him more than she should have. The family dinner was over. Ryota's father and Mariko decided to go to a bar while Ryota was asked to go home with Yuzuki. Ryota was about to ask the girl to go home, but he remembered Miss Hiro again when he saw Yuzuki. The two girls looked very similar. Yuzuki realized that Ryota was still looking at her. She then asked what was wrong, and Ryota was quite confused to answer. From now on, they were brothers, but even so, Ryota could not immediately accept the reality of it. Yuzuki approached and called Ryota Ne-chan. Ryota was shocked. Yuzuki tried to reassure Ryota that she would not immediately pounce on Ryota. She admitted that she also understood that Ryota was still confused. Yuzuki said that she didn't like Ryota's formal attitude towards her. They would soon be family, so Yuzuki wanted them to be freer and not be fixated on formalities. Yuzuki wanted Ryota to call her by name and without using honorifics when talking to her. Yuzuki hugged Ryota's arm suddenly. Ryota asked because he was confused about what Yuzuki was doing, especially since they were outside. Yuzuki didn't want Ryota to worry and said that it was natural for them to be close now that Yuzuki was Ryota's little sister. Ryota still wanted Yuzuki to let go of his arm. Yuzuki ignored Ryota's words and then whispered to Ryota to call her Yuzuki. Ryota was forced to struggle to call the girl Yuzuki. The girl then kissed Ryota's cheek, and suddenly it made Ryota was very surprised. Ryota asked what exactly Yuzuki was doing to him. The girl explained that what had just happened was a normal thing for siblings. Ryota didn't understand. Kissing wasn't something siblings usually did. Yuzuki denied it, saying that sibling kisses were normal. She even did it often with her older sister. Ryota was surprised to hear that Yuzuki had an older sister. Yuzuki explained that she had an older sister. They often exchanged sibling kisses as a form of affection for each other. Ryota was still surprised to learn that Mariko had 2 daughters. Yuzuki explained that Mariko did have 2 daughters, but when they divorced, her older sister lived with her father. This story made the atmosphere between them a little awkward. Yuzuki apologized for changing the vibe for the worse. Ryota didn't mind. He was more curious about whether the previous incident made Yuzuki lonely. And sure enough, the girl was lonely, but that was just an event in the past. She also knew that her feelings would never change. She wanted Ryota, as her older brother, to take care of her and care for her in the future. The next day in class, Ryota's seat was not far from his ex-girlfriend, Miss Hiro. Miss Hiro sat straight, facing the front. Not long after, their teacher came and announced that their class had a transfer student. Yuzuki walked into the class, and when she was in front of the class, she was asked to introduce herself. Miss Hiro, who saw Yuzuki, rushed forward and hugged her. Miss Hiro seemed to miss Yuzuki very much. Miss Hiro cried because her long wait was now over with her meeting with Yuzuki, whom she had liked for so long. Yuzuki only showed an embarrassed expression, while Ryota in the back seat was quite confused about what was happening. This time, let's focus on Miss Hiro as Yusagawa. Since childhood, Miss Hiro has had different preferences from others. Because of this, she has difficulty fitting in, even now. When she is sad and down, there is only one figure who always calms and comforts her. That figure is Yuzuki, her twin sister. Miss Hiro often cries, and Yuzuki is the one always asks her sister not to cry. Miss Hiro then says that if Yuzuki kisses her, Miss Hiro will not cry anymore. Yuzuki gives what Miss Hiro asks for, not a kiss on the cheek, but a kiss on the lips. Yuzuki is not only her twin sister but also her emotional support for Miss Hiro. Miss Hiro cannot live without Yuzuki, but one day the two must be separated. Miss Hiro, of course, was very unhappy about this. Yuzuki then reassured Miss Hiro by saying that if Miss Hiro were a good girl, they would surely meet someday. Those words were like a curse to Miss Hiro, but she could only obey. Her wait was over. Now she could see Yuzuki again. Miss Hiro hugged Yuzuki in front of the class, raising questions from anyone who saw them. Yuzuki didn't hug back. She let go and asked Miss Hiro to stop. Miss Hiro was confused by Yuzuki's behavior. Ryota asked what was going on, and Yuzuki replied that her sister was being annoying. He didn't like how Miss Hiro suddenly came and hugged him tightly in front of so many people without paying attention to the surroundings first. Hearing Yuzuki call her annoying left Miss Hiro stunned and confused. Miss Hiro then apologized to Yuzuki, but Yuzuki said that Miss Hiro was apologizing to the wrong person. Miss Hiro was increasingly confused by Yuzuki's intentions. Yuzuki stopped calling Miss Hiro by her first name and started calling her twin brother, Azusagawa. Yuzuki then turned to Ryota and said that the two of them planned to have lunch together, Yuzuki and her beloved older brother. Miss Hiro was stunned to see the two of them. She was even more confused when Yuzuki kissed Ryota on the cheek. Yuzuki smiled slightly and said that it wasn't natural, like the two of them before. She was now giving Ryota a sibling kiss, her new brother. Miss Hiro then asked what about herself. Yuzuki answered firmly that it was no longer possible because the two of them were now strangers. Yuzuki started to take Ryota's hand and leave together, but Miss Hiro stopped her for a moment, asking why Yuzuki was acting like that towards her. Yuzuki angrily said that it was natural. Miss Hiro had also dumped Ryota. With those words, Miss Hiro felt regret, not because she had rejected Ryota, but because she had upset Yuzuki, the person she loved. Miss Hiro could no longer deny the fact that she was a lesbian. Time passed and evening arrived. Ryota had a long day with a lot of things happening. Because of that, he didn't feel like cooking. He opened the door and was surprised when Yuzuki welcomed him home. He just remembered that he had a stepsister. Ryota had come home quite late that day because of club activities. He didn't have time to cook, so he offered to order pizza for dinner. Yuzuki was sure they wouldn't need it because she had already made dinner for him. Yuzuki invited Ryota to take a shower while she would take care of the dirty laundry. Yuzuki asked Ryota to entrust his dirty clothes to her to wash. Ryota thanked Yuzuki for what she offered and gave her a bag containing his clothes that needed to be washed. Yuzuki looked happy to see the bag of clothes. Ryota hurried off to take a shower. Soon, he was done, and dinner was ready for him. Ryota enjoyed the dinner that Yuzuki had cooked for him. Afterwards, Yuzuki also served some slices of watermelon for them to eat together. Honestly, Ryota was a little worried about what happened that day at school, and maybe that event would make his relationship with Yuzuki worse. However, it was clear that he had nothing to worry about. Suddenly, Yuzuki moved to sit next to Ryota. When asked the reason, Yuzuki said it would be easier to feed Ryota up close. Ryota was increasingly reminded of Miss Hiro because Yuzuki's appearance with his ex-girlfriend was indeed similar. Ryota asked Yuzuki to stop, but the girl became more firm in her stance, even calling Ryota Ryota-kun. Ryota could only comply with Yuzuki's wishes. After that, he asked what name Yuzuki had just used to call him. Yuzuki asked Ryota back how the young man wanted to be called, whether by the name Nia-chan or Ryota-kun. Ryota, while averting his gaze, answered for Yuzuki to call him Nia-chan as usual. After dinner, Yuzuki turned to Ryota's laundry. She took a shirt out of Ryota's pocket and sniffed it. Yuzuki used Ryota's dirty clothes to satisfy her cravings. After she finished, she remembered that Ryota saw Miss Hiro in her. She knew Ryota still couldn't forget Miss Hiro. Although it annoyed Yuzuki, she would still use it as much as she wanted. The next day at school, Ryota met his childhood friend, a tomboyish girl named Yatsuba. They were in the student locker room. Ryota wanted the girl to leave because he wanted to change clothes. After all, Yatsuba was a girl. It was strange for her to be in the student locker room. Yatsuba was there because there were no male students there, but there was Ryota in front of her. Yatsuba didn't think of Ryota as a man. Yatsuba asked Ryota not to pay attention to her. Yatsuba and Ryota then talked about Yuz Uki while Ryota was changing. Yatsuba said that Yuzuki had become a popular student in their school in an instant. Yuzuki's charm was undeniable, especially with her friendly nature. She would become popular quickly. Yotsuba wanted to know if Yuzuki had a boyfriend, but Ryota replied that his stepsister didn't have one. Yotsuba was shocked and couldn't believe it. With Yuzuki's charm, he was sure Yuzuki should have at least 1 or 2 boyfriends. Yotsuba accepted the information half-heartedly. She knew that Yuzuki did seem surprisingly guarded. When asked, Yuzuki always said clearly that she loved her brother. Yuzuki never hid her brocon attitude. Yotsuba was sure that it was just Yuzuki's tactic. Yotsuba wanted to know if Ryota was bothered by Yuzuki's attitude, and Ryota said that he wasn't. Deep down, Ryota knew there was no point in worrying about it. Yotsuba then turned to talk about Miss Hiro. Lately, Ryota's ex-girlfriend hasn't seemed to be doing well. Every time someone talked to her, Miss Hiro always spaced out. Hearing that made Ryota react when Yotsuba asked. The girl realized that her best friend still couldn't forget Miss Hiro. Yotsuba tried to be a support system for Ryota. Whenever Ryota needed her, Yotsuba promised she would listen. She even tried to ask Ryota to go on a date with her, but Ryota refused. Ryota could feel that being with Yotsuba made him feel relaxed. In Ryota's eyes, Yotsuba didn't look like a girl. Ryota arrived home. Yuzuki welcomed Ryota but called him Ryota-kun again. As before, Yuzuki asked for Ryota's dirty clothes and invited him to take a shower, but this time Ryota refused. Yuzuki said that it was not good. Ryota was so sweaty from club activities that he should immediately clean himself. Yuzuki moved behind Ryota and started sniffing Ryota's clothes that were still worn by Ryota. Ryota was surprised by Yuzuki's behavior. Finally, he could not refuse and immediately went into the bathroom. While in the bathroom, Ryota could smell a sweet scent like Miss Hiro's. Suddenly, the door opened, and Yuzuki came in naked.